Alright, live. Welcome to my video. This is going to be a spoiler-free review of the 2011 MCU one-shot short film, The Consultant. I don't think I'll be doing a spoiler section on this one, because I don't really have much to say that can't be said without spoilers. So, there will only be spoilers for the MCU leading up to, but not including this short film. So, at this point, I think this short film is mostly this kind of time capsule curiosity kind of thing. You know, it doesn't... You don't need to watch it to understand very much of the MCU, which, you know, the MCU, not entirely unfairly, has been accused of giving us audiences homework, you know. This one, yeah, I myself only watched it, I don't know, a few years ago, not very many years ago, certainly not 14 years ago. Right, so a little bit of, this was originally, at first, the only way to watch this was on the Thor Blu-ray. You know, this was something they did to increase sales of home media. And basically, part of why it exists is the... I don't know if I want to give away exactly what. Oh, actually, no, never mind. Thinking about it, because it's one of the very first things said in this short. Basically, at this point in the MCU, the first Avengers movie had not come out yet, but The Incredible Hulk had, and there is a scene, you know, at the very, very end. It's technically post-credit scene because it's right before the credits, so I guess not, but they were still trying to figure out how to do that at this point in the MCU, where Tony Stark approaches, I can't believe it, yeah, Ross, Thunderbolt Ross, and, you know, says, we're putting a team together. And it's one of those things, at this point in the MCU, they were still trying to figure out exactly how to tie it all together, and several of these early films have things where you can see how, oh, that would lead into this, you know, and yeah, they didn't know. Yeah, so obviously, as mentioned, I'm not going to be spoiling the Avengers, but, you know, suffice to say, this post-credit scene, you know, once people watched the Avengers, you know, it was unclear exactly what was accomplished here, and it also had people wondering what exactly was going to be the payoff. You know, so yeah, both before and after the first Avengers came out, this short film had people scratching their heads. That post-credits, holy crap. Maybe I should not record this soon after I get up in the morning. That post-credit scene had people scratching their heads. This short film is in part just trying to address that, and, you know, considering it's, let's see, like 3 minutes, you know, it's not, like, super annoying that they even did this. Like, it would suck if this was, like, an entire movie just explaining, just filling in holes, you know, yeah. But no, it does pretty well, and something I do appreciate is it actually features a... We're told what happened after the post-credit scene, and it's fun and feels like the kind of thing that really would have happened. But, yeah, it remains fascinating to me that they were, you know, by this point, there's still occasionally they'll, you know, in the MCU, they will have something that doesn't have a payoff, or not the payoff that was expected, But today they kind of just act like, well, what? You know, that was, you know, they don't release short films to explain it, to backfill. And this was also a time where they really did not want to retcon anything. So they would instead make these, you know, wild swings in order to try to make it all fit together. You know, this is also partially why, you know, the second Iron Man movie is set before the Incredible Hulk rather than after, because and this is, you know, I have this direct from the direct, I cannot believe how bad I'm doing with names right now. Okay, Jon Favreau on the commentary track for the second Iron Man movie, where he says, you know, as soon as we see the, you know, 6 months later, you know, yeah, after seeing the very end of the first movie, he explains, you know, I think, was it a conversation with Feige, maybe something like that, you know, where he's like, well, what, I can't have the Hulk in the, you know, yeah, because of this post-credit scene. And yeah, it was, you know, I think it was Feige's idea, well, just have it take place before the Incredible Hulk, you know, 6 months after the first Iron Man. And I'm very glad that they did eventually stop doing this and just, you know, more or less make the movies that they felt like making, you know, with limitations, obviously. But instead of trying to really tailor everything to make it 100% cohesive. But and it is something, you know, this is not the only of these one-shots to have this kind of, yeah, to very closely deal with continuity of the MCU at the time. But yeah, the short is essentially Coulson and gonna have to look up his name as well. Where do we have Sitwell? You know, basically talking in a diner about this situation. And yeah, it works quite well. You know, this was a time when the MCU was, you know, a lot of it was like dialogue and just character interaction. It, you know, I don't know if it was budget or technology. Yeah, probably technology, because these were always pretty expensive movies. But, you know, they couldn't churn out, like today, the action in some of the movies have really taken over. But yeah, back then, you know, people forget. If you haven't watched it in a while, you know, rewatch the first Iron Man movie. It really holds up in a lot of ways. And yeah, one of the things that really won people over were these character interactions, all this snappy, quippy dialogue. You know, that's like 2008. The, you know, comic book movies were in, like, I'm not saying that they were as widely hated as like right after Batman and Robin, but there definitely was still some reticence. Like, it was essentially like, well, okay, so the X-Men movies and these Nolan Batman movies are good, but, you know, what about everything else? Because this was still the, you know, Iron Man 1 came out 3 years after, yeah, 1 and 3 years after two pretty mid at best Fantastic Four movies. Like, those movies, not everything doesn't work, but there's a lot that doesn't. And yeah, I think that might be more or less what there is to say. Let's see. Yeah, I think then that might be everything. This was also a time in the MCU where, like, something like S.H.I.E.L.D. played a really significant role, which I'm not going to give away exactly how, why, or when, but after a while, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. less crucial to the MCU. But yeah, that's also part of what's going on here. We're seeing S.H.I.E.L.D. like in the background trying to make sure things go well, and yeah, it works. You know, it accomplishes what it sets out to do.